subscribe today.
So here's a bit about my testimony. Where do I begin? Okay, so I was born premature. Between 6 and 7 months, my mom was pregnant with me, and then I was born early. She did not know that I was going to be born with my arm like this. Even when I was born inside of my parents' apartment. After I was born, my dad was the first one to see that I was born with my arm like this. Ambulance met them there, and they had wrapped me up and took me, so she had no idea at first. And it was something my dad didn't want to tell her at first. Clearly, like, nobody wants their child to be born with a disability. And anyway, so afterwards, growing up, being born like this, it was pretty tough. I think a lot of it I just dealt with and buried and those kind of things. It was never anything that I talked about. And even in my family aspect, it was never something like we communicated about or talked about. It was just like we kind of just acted like this wasn't the case. Like, I wasn't born like this. Like, we just never acknowledged it. It was just not a thing we ever acknowledged, ever talked about. So a lot of my mental struggle that I went through about being born with a disability was that all of the information I was taking on myself and believing about myself was all from outside reactions of people, school, just basically like people who were strangers, and seeing that people were having a response to me, or people were staring at me, or people were whispering about me, those type of things. And it's just like, hey, what's going on? So it felt really there was a real negative attachment to having a disability. For me, in some ways, I guess me being me, I can see the both good and bad of my family not acknowledging my disability. It was just not something we spoke about. Maybe when I was a bit older, like my teenage years, it was more, how do I say, we would joke about it here and there, especially my brothers, but not in a way that ever made me feel down, but almost including me fully, if that makes any sense. So that's what it made me feel like. This part of me wasn't being left out, and they were making light of it in that sense. So shout out to my brother for that. So for a long time, I did feel that I had to make up for what I lacked, and that I wasn't equal to a full person or a whole person. And because I wasn't a whole person, that if I wanted somebody to choose me, to love me, over a person who was whole, physically speaking, that I had to do extra. I had to make up for myself. And I did that for a long time, to where everything I did was to please people. All my choices was based on if it made other people happy, if they would like me more. To the point that when I was older and God had to sit with me and really be like, Dominique, what are the things that you like? And I couldn't think of things, because everything I did was based off other people. Long story short, it took me a long time to get free from that kind of mindset. It was to the point that I did hate myself, truly and completely. I just didn't understand why I was born the way that I was born. And God really had to deal with me. It was a question that I asked him all the time. God, why did you allow this? Why did you allow this? Why did you allow this? Especially too, because I didn't know any other disabled people. I didn't have access to anyone who knew other disabled people. Like, you know, I just felt so much of like, you know, the odd one out, the oddball, this broken thing. I got me to a point where I had to face myself, and even he did answer me why he allowed me to be this way. And I know the answer is not going to be an answer that everybody likes, because a lot of the time everybody just see God as this righteous, good, pure, perfect God. And not that he isn't that, he is very much so, but I think people sometimes forget the reality of God is almighty, and he gets to decide whatever he wants to decide. I'll put a little clip in here because I have to go back and read what I had wrote down from the experience where God spoke to me and gave me that answer. Guys, so here's the story of God answering my question. I was watching another YouTuber, and she has said the words, Goliath was sent to reveal who David really was. And instantly in the spirit, I had heard your hand. And instantly I wanted to reject it. I didn't want to accept what I was hearing. And anyways, the reason was because I was going through the refining process at the time, and I felt already so depleted in the way that God was taking so much from me already. And now he was asking for the very thing that was such a big part of me, such a big part of my life. And I knew he was asking for my identity and who my arm made me. And it was such a big part of my life. It felt almost like, wow, that the Lord would ask me such a question, like, can he have this? And it was like, but that's who I am, kind of thing. And he was just like, can I have it? In that way. So right after I heard the voice of God say, meditate on it. So I did. I sat there with it for a little while. And shortly after that, while I was meditating on it, I went into a vision, and I saw myself sitting there. And then a person came up to me and asked me the very same question that I had been asking God all these years was, why were you allowed to be born like this? Or why did God allow you to be born like this? And when they asked me that question, I knew it was the very last time that that question would ever have to be asked. Yeah, so in the vision, I smiled at the person and I said, because he could. And I know that might be hard to grasp for some people, but when I smiled, I knew that there was this trust that God had in me, that I would allow him to use my disability to mold me into who he created me to be. Hope in the future hit me, and I understood that my past was needed to bring about my future. And I always knew that I wouldn't be who I am now without my disability. So to a degree, later in life, I was grateful for my disability because I like who I am. So we'll move on from that. So yeah, so there was like a lot of hate. There was a couple of times I thought about suicide, unfortunately. It was just so bad, and no one knew how bad it really was. To just go around, walking around, despising yourself, and the only reason you're walking around and living is because of your child or other people, or what other people might even think about you, and get to this hopeless point. And I had gotten there. God had used somebody prophetically to speak to my mom and say, hey, you have a daughter, her name starts with a D, spirit of depression is heavy over her, and suicide and all the things, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, my mom called me literally right after I had left the bathroom, where I was trying to figure out how I could harm myself. Anyways, people had came home, so I had to come out of the bathroom, and my mom ended up calling me right after that and saying, hey, is this how you feel? And she just spoke those words. My voice like got caught in my throat. Like I couldn't believe she was asking me what she was asking me. And she immediately got me out of there where I was and moved me to where she was. Because the prophetic word given to her told her that needs to be done, that I needed to get where I was from and get with her. So that happened. And then I was still feeling broken. I was still feeling down, all the things. I ended up going through a custody case with my son and his dad. My mom had told me to pray and fast. That was the first time I ever had prayed and fasted in that way about anything. So after going through that and then being in court and having the judge say everything that she was saying, it was seeming like I wasn't going to be able to move. And then right at the end, I don't know what happened, but she completely switched and said that I was able to go, basically. That me and my son was able to go. And I remember her response caught me off guard so much, because it truly, everything she was saying seemed like I wasn't going to be able to go. And then all of a sudden, it was so evident like God had moved in that situation. And from there, I was hooked in a different way that I had never been with God, because I always had felt like there was something more, but I didn't necessarily know what that was. Like, so I was still very open to what else could this be kind of thing then. So I knew then after that experience, like, okay, there's something here with God. And that's when I started to dive in more. And then I started to have dreams and visions and all the things. But, and that started my journey consistently with God and seriously with God after that. I felt led to talk about that last little push that actually got me to start this YouTube channel. And what it was, I was scrolling on Instagram, and there was this woman, and she was talking about her difficulties with her disabled son and things that she had been going through. So I had went to the comments because I was curious. And I went to the comments and I saw a lot of people talking about their experiences with the church and how it was difficult, even like there was not space in the church for disabled people, if you get what I mean. And even that disabled people were a majority that the church was not reaching. And as soon as I had read that, I heard in the spirit God say, that's why I need you to do what I called you to do. And so, and the very next day, I believe, I started the YouTube channel.